Hello dear students. In this video, I'll share with you a beautiful story from your supplementary reader Vistas, chapter 5. Should Wizard Hit Mommy? Written by John Updike. Dear students, little children are fond of hearing stories by their parents. At what time? Especially at the bedtime. Very often, the parents create stories out of their own mind, and most of such stories have no logic behind them as they are unreal. But the little children take such stories seriously and they take them as true stories. But gradually, as they grow up, they become curious. They start asking questions, and sometimes the questions become difficult questions for the parents. They want to know why and how certain things happened. They want to know the reasons behind those things. And sometimes parents find this questioning of the children very irritating. And sometimes they discourage their children to ask questions between the stories. Whatever they tell their children, they want them to accept as true. But there is a question for this. Is it desirable that the parents impose their thinking on their children? And there are question marks. The same thing happens in this story too. Between the storytelling session, the daughter interrupts her father many times, a number of times. Whenever she feels something wrong happened in the story, she raises questions. But in the end of the story, the father feels irritated because of this questioning of his daughter. And because of the difficult moral question that the daughter raises during the storytelling session with her father, the father finds himself caught in an ugly middle position. These are the last words of the story, the chapter. So this story raises a moral issue and leaves it to the reader to resolve it. Now, let's move forward. This is a very interesting story about a father and a daughter. Kindly watch the complete video till the end. Should wizard hit mommy? Who is a wizard? A wizard is a man who has magical powers. And what is mommy? In American English, mommy is an endearing term for one's mother, a term that is most typically used by children. Now, let's begin with the story. Father's name was Jack, and the daughter's name was Joe. Jack and Joe. The father was very good storyteller. He would tell the stories to his daughter out of his own mind. And the daughter was fond of listening his stories, listening to his stories. She really loved listening to the stories by her father. This trend of storytelling started when Joe was just 2 years old, and now in this story, 2 years are over after this trend had started. So, what is the meaning of this? That means Joe is now 4 years old. The main intention of the father of telling stories to the daughter, you know what was the intention? The intention was to make the daughter to sleep. And now gradually this task was getting tougher as the daughter is growing in age. Jack had to tell the stories to the daughter in the evenings and for Saturday naps. Each new story was almost the same of the same pattern with slight variation. The story always went like this. Now listen to this. A small creature named Roger. Remember this name, Rodger, Roger. It could be Roger Fish, Roger Squirrel, Roger Chipmunk, and so on. In every story, Roger had some problem and went with it to the wise owl. The owl would tell him to go to the wizard, and the wizard would wizard performed some magical spell, and then he would solve the problem, demanding in payment some amount of money, number of pennies, greater than the number that Roger creature had. But at the same time, this wizard would direct the animal to go to a place where the extra pennies could be arranged or found. Then Roger would become so happy, and he would play many games with other creatures, and would go home to his mother just in time to hear the train whistle that would bring his daddy home from Boston. That was the usual ending of every story. After this, Jack described dinner, and then the story was over. So this was the usual pattern of each story, of every story that Jack would tell to his daughter. The name Roger remains the same, but the characters of the animals change in every story. Continuing through this way was especially tiring on Saturday, because Joe never fell asleep in naps anymore, and she knew this made the task seem futile or useless. The little girl Jo, who is not actually very little now, seems to be waiting for her father to tell her the story. And her actions say that she is not willing to go to sleep. In the chapter, Jo has a younger brother also, and his name is, what is his name? Bobby. He was 2 years old and already asleep with his feeding bottle. And Jack asked his daughter, who shall the story be about? Then the daughter excitedly replied to her father that Roger Skunk. You know who is skunk? What is skunk? Skunk is a cat-sized American mammal of the weasel family with distinctive black and white striped fur. When threatened, it squirts a fine spray of foul-smelling irritant liquid from its anal glands towards its attacker. Why Joe took the name of skunk this time? Any ideas? Because recently she was taught about this animal in her school. When Jack heard about the name of this fresh hero, he too gets excited and enthusiastic. And without thinking anything, Jack started his story. And these were the starting words. Once upon a time, in the deep dark woods, there was a tiny little creature by the name of Roger Skunk, and he smelled very bad. Since Joe already knew about this animal, she intervened and said, yes, he smelled so bad that none of the other little woodland creatures would play with him. Jack continued the story with excitement, remembering certain humiliations or insults of his own childhood. Why? Because he identifies himself with Roger Skunk, because he also faced humiliations or embarrassing situations in his childhood time as Roger Skunk faces because of his foul smell. And this is the reason that he gets very excited when the daughter suggested him the name of Roger Skunk. He continued his story. He said, all of the other tiny animals would cry. What would they cry? Here comes the stinky skunk. And they would run away, and Roger Skunk would stand there all alone, and two little round tears would fall from his eyes. When the father said these lines, the corner of Joe's mouth hung down, and her lower lip went forward as he traced with the forefinger along the side of her nose the course of one of Roger Skunk's tears. At this point, the daughter feels very bad for Roger Skunk, and she intervened in the story. She said, won't he see the owl? Excitedly, she said that. Seeing the excitement of the daughter, Jack feels very happy because he was telling us something that was true, and he felt as he was telling his own story to his daughter. And this is the important point of the story. Now, not of the story of Roger Skunk, but in the story of Jack and Joe. The wife of Jack is, the name of the wife is Claire. Uh, Downstairs, she was painting the living room woodwork. And for that work, she desperately needed the help of her husband. But her husband was busy telling the story to the daughter. Claire had to move. This is also important point of the chapter. Claire had to move heavy furniture downstairs that could be risky for her because she was 6 months pregnant and it would be their third. And she really needed the help of her husband. But Jack does not seem to be in hurry because he was telling something that was too close to his heart, and he seems to be very excited telling the story. Jack continued. He said, Roger walked along very sad and came to a very big tree, and in the tip top of the tree was an enormous wise owl. Roger said to Mr. Owl, Mr. Owl, all the other little animals run away from me because I smell so bad. And Owl agreed and he said, yes, you really smell very bad. What can I do? Roger felt very bad and he started crying. Joe once again intervened in the story and she shouted, the wizard, the wizard. And at this point, Daddy feels little irritated because the daughter was disturbing the daddy again and again. He said, Daddy is telling a story. Do you want to tell Daddy story? In irritating voice, he said like that. And then Jack continued. The owl thought, and then finally he said, why don't you go to see the wizard? At this point, Joe once again disturbed the father. She asked the father, are the magic spells real? This was actually a new phase that started last month only, a reality phase. Uh, Once, when he told her, spiders eat bugs. He went to her mother and said, do they really? And once Claire, the mother, Claire told her, God was in the sky. She turned to her father and asked him with a cunning smile, is he really? So these are the ways in which she started asking questions. The father continued with the story and said the magic spells are real in stories. She had actually made him miss a beat in the narrative. The owl said, "Go through the dark woods under the apple trees into the swamp over the creek, and there you will find wizard's house. Then, following the instructions of the owl, Roger Skunk went to a little white house and he knocked on the door. Then a tiny little man came out with a long white beard and a pointed blue hat, and he asked, "What is the matter? What do you want? You smell awful." And Roger Skunk said, the enormous wise owl said, "You could help me. The other little animals ran away from me." Then the wizard let him in and said, "Don't get too close to me." Why? Because of his foul smell. The father continued, there were all these magic things inside, and all jumbled together in a big dusty heap because the wizard did not have what? A cleaning lady. And the daughter asked, "Why?" Once again, she asked the question, "Why?" The father replied, "Because he was a wizard and a very old man." So that was the reply of the father. Jack actually was not ready to answer these questions of the daughter. One more question did the daughter ask, "Will he die?" And the father replied, "No, wizards don't die." He continued, "The wizard searched and found an old stick called a magic wand and asked Roger Skunk what he wanted to smell like." Roger Skunk thought and said, "Roses." And on hearing this, Joe felt very happy, excited, and she said, "Yes, good." And then Jack, imitating the wizard, he chanted. And you know what did he do? Abracadabra, hocus poo, Roger Skunk, how do you do? Roses, boses, pull an ear, Roger Skunk, you never fear. Bingo. And all of a sudden, the whole inside of the wizard's house was full of the smell of roses. And when his foul smell was turned into the smell of roses, a wizard asked for something. He asked for 7 pennies. Roger Skunk said that he had only 4 pennies, and he began to cry. Joe thought that now the father was going to wind up the story, so she lost some interest in the story because she thought that the story was going to be over at that happy ending point. And this annoyed Jack because for him the story was not yet over. At this point, Jack heard the sounds of the furniture that his wife was making, and he was worried about her. But more importantly, he wanted to finish with the story. He continued the story. Wizard said, "Oh, very well. Go to the end of the lane and turn around 3 times and look down the magic well, and there you will find 3 pennies." Roger Skunk went to the end of the lane and turned around. How many times? 3 times. And there in the magic well, there were 3 pennies. And he took them, these 3 pennies, took them back to the wizard and was very happy and ran out in the woods, and all the other little animals gathered around because he smelled so good, and they played different games together so happily. They played games and laughed all afternoon. And then it began to dark, and they all went home to their mommies. Joe started losing interest at this time now in the story because she thought that that was the end of the story. But Jack did not like the reaction of his daughter. Ignoring his daughter's reaction, Jack continued the story. He asked his daughter Joe, "Are you listening? Are you listening, dear students?" So he also asked the same question to his daughter, "Are you listening?" The daughter said, "Yes." Jack said, "This part of the story is going to be very interesting part." Roger Skunk's mommy said, "What's that awful smell?" And do you know which smell she calls awful? The smell of roses. Roger Skunk said, "It's me, mommy. I smell like roses." And then the mother asked. She asked, "Who made you smell like that?" Roger Skunk replied, "The wizard." On hearing this, she was full of anger, the mother, and she asked her son to come with her and said, "We are going right back to that very awful wizard." And on hearing this, Joe became very tensed and she said, "But Daddy, all the animals ran away from him because of his bad smell." And ignoring the daughter, Jack continued his story. Roger Skunk said, "But Mummy, all other little animals run away." But the mother said, you know what did she say? The mother said, "I don't care. And you smell the way a little skunk should have, and I'm going to take you right back to that, where? Wizard." And she took an umbrella and went back with Roger Skunk and hit that wizard right over his head. And this was really a twist in the story. On hearing this, Joe was full of anger and an inspiration came on her. She said, "Then the wizard hit her on her head and did not change that little skunk back." She wanted to end the story like that. So this was the ending that Joe wanted to give to this story. But it was not the end of the father's story. He continued and said, that wizard changed the smell again, and Roger Skunk did not smell of roses anymore. He smelled very bad again. At this point, Joe once again intervened and said, "But the other little animals." And at this point, Daddy got angry on the daughter and threatened her that he would not tell her the stories anymore if she does like that. The father continues the story and he said, "This is what happened then." Roger Skunk and his mommy went home and they heard woo woo, and it was the choo choo train bringing Daddy home from where? Do you remember? From Boston. And then they had their tasty meal. So that was the happy ending of the father's story. And when Roger Skunk was in bed, mommy came up and hugged him and said he smelled like a little baby again and she loved him very much. So that was the end of the story of the father. At this, the daughter felt very upset and she asked her daddy about the other animals who ran away from Roger Skunk. Daddy replied, "No," because eventually they got used to the way he was and did not mind it at all. And all of a sudden, the daughter got extremely angry on the mommy of Roger Skunk, and she said that was stupid mommy. Jack felt very bad and said, "No, it was not." Jack felt extremely disappointed, but did not want to continue the argument with his daughter. Otherwise, she would feel that the father was trying to defend his own mother. He got angry on his daughter and ordered her to go to sleep right away. But the daughter was also angry, so angry on the father, and she was adamant not to go to where? Not to go to sleep. And she was insisting her father, Father, tomorrow I want you to tell me the story that the wizard took that magic wand and hit that mommy. Jack said, "No, that's not the story. The point is that the little skunk loved his mummy more than he loved all the other little animals, and she knew, who knew? The mother knew what was right." But the daughter was adamant, and she said, "No, tomorrow you say he hit that mommy." Jack's situation was very embarrassing. Actually, he was identifying, this is important, very important point. Actually, he was identifying his own mother with the mother of Roger Skunk. And when the daughter was speaking about the mother of Roger Skunk, he felt that she was speaking about his own mother. Whose mother? Jack's mother. Jack had to go down to help his wife because she was moving the heavy objects alone. But his first duty was to put the daughter to sleep. His Jack's mood, his mood was now completely spoiled, destroyed, and leaving the daughter as it is, he went down to help his wife. He closed the door and went downstairs. She was painting and doing heavy work. She said to her husband, that was a long story. And the last part of the story says, Jack found himself, very important words, Jack found himself in an ugly middle position. He felt that he was in a cage along with his wife, but he did not want to speak with her, work with her, and do anything. Why he felt that he was in an ugly middle position? So here is the answer. Jack wanted to make his daughter accept that the skunk's mother was right, but he failed in that. He found it impossible to convince his daughter for that. And at the same time, he was aware about his duties as a father and also as a husband. He realized that his wife was in the desperate need of his help. But actually, he wanted to give a happy ending to his story as per his own perspective, and therefore he was completely frustrated and he felt utter weariness and did not want to speak with his wife or work with her or touch her. He was actually caught in an ugly middle position. So this is the answer. So this is the end of the story, and I hope that you have enjoyed it. And in order to have a clear understanding of the story, kindly watch this video at least twice. You can watch this video thrice also. It's up to you. But one more very important thing, dear students, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, kindly subscribe to it now, and not only subscribe but like, subscribe and share, and also kindly don't forget to press the bell icon so that you don't miss any latest videos. Thank you so much for watching.